The notary's pen stopped halfway through her signature. She just froze, hand hovering over the paper, looking at my driver's license like it had grown teeth. Then she set the pen down very carefully, the way you'd set down something fragile, and asked if I could step into her back office for a moment. Privately, just me, not my husband. He laughed from across the room and said, "Sure, take her. Just don't keep my pregnant wife too long." She smiled at him. It was the kind of smile that doesn't move past the lips. I followed her down a narrow hallway lined with cheap framed prints of beach sunsets, and she shut the door behind us and turned the little brass lock. That click is still the loudest sound I've ever heard in my life. She told me to sit down. I didn't sit. I asked if something was wrong with the paperwork. She looked at me. This woman may be 60, gray hair pulled back tight, reading glasses on a beaded chain, and her eyes were wet. She said, "Honey, I've been a notary for 31 years. I've seen a lot, and what your husband is asking you to sign right now is not what he told you it is. You need to walk out of this office. You need to not go home tonight. And I'm begging you to find a divorce attorney before the sun comes up tomorrow." I laughed. I actually laughed. It came out high and weird, the way nervous laughter does when your brain hasn't caught up to your body yet. I told her she had to be confused. We were just refinancing the house so we could finish the nursery. He'd shown me the loan documents that morning. I was 7 months pregnant. Whatever she thought she saw, she had it wrong. She didn't argue. She just slid one page out of the stack and turned it around and pointed at a paragraph I hadn't read because it was paragraph 42 of a 47-page document, and my husband had told me it was boilerplate. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up, because if you don't understand who I was before that morning, you won't understand why I almost signed. My name is Rowena. I'm 31. I grew up in a small town outside Asheville, North Carolina, in a house my great-great-grandfather built with his own hands in 1904. The Calloway place. Everyone in 3 counties knew it. My mama raised me there alone after my daddy died of a heart attack when I was 6. She worked as a high school librarian and clipped coupons and made our clothes, and somehow she held on to that house and the 83 acres around it. When I went to college, she made me promise that whatever I did, wherever I ended up, I'd come back to that land someday. I promised. I meant it. I went to UNC for undergrad and got a master's in landscape architecture at NC State. I built a career designing public parks and botanical gardens, the kind of work you don't get rich doing, but that lets you sleep at night. I moved to Charlotte for a job at a mid-sized firm and bought a small condo. Modest life. Modest paycheck. But here's the thing nobody knew, not even most of my friends, when my granddaddy died 8 years ago. The family land passed to me, not my mama. He'd set it up that way decades before, said the land needed to skip a generation to keep it safe. 83 acres of Blue Ridge mountainside, a 1904 farmhouse on the National Register, and a trust my granddaddy had quietly funded over 40 years that came out, when the lawyer finally walked me through it, to just over $3 million. I didn't tell people. I didn't change my car. I didn't change my apartment. The money sat in the trust earning interest, and I kept showing up to work in my Honda and packing my own lunch. The land was the point, not the money. I met my husband at a coffee shop in Charlotte 3 years ago. I was working on plans for a memorial garden. Papers spread across 2 tables, and a man in a navy suit asked if he could share the outlet by my chair because his laptop was dying. He said his name was Lachlan Beaufort. He had the slow, easy Southern accent, charcoal hair just starting to silver at the temples, and a laugh that sounded like it had nothing to hide. He said he was a regional manager for a commercial real estate company. He didn't ask what I did for a long time, and when I finally told him, he asked actual questions about it, about native plants, about stormwater management, about the last project I designed. Nobody asks about the last project I designed. They glaze over by sentence 2. He didn't. We dated for 10 months. He was attentive, present, never made me feel small. He met my mama on Mother's Day weekend, and afterward, when we were driving back to Charlotte, my mama called me. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Baby, that man is too smooth. I don't know how to say it, He answers every question before you finish asking it. I told her she was being unfair. He'd been polite. He'd brought her flowers. He'd helped do the dishes. She said, "Rowena Jane, listen to your mama one time in your life. There's something not right about him." I was angry. I told her she didn't want me to be happy. I told her she'd been so alone for so long she'd forgotten what a good man looked like. I hung up on my own mother. I didn't call her back for 9 months. We got married 14 months after we met. Tiny ceremony at the courthouse in Charlotte. He said he wanted it small because he didn't have much family. I said okay, because I was in love. My mama came. She wore a blue dress and barely smiled in the photos, and she hugged me so tight at the end I thought she was going to break a rib. She whispered, "I'm here whenever you need me." I rolled my eyes. I was 30 years old and rolled my eyes at my widowed mother on my wedding day. I'll carry that one for the rest of my life. We tried for a baby right away. I was 30, he was 38. Neither of us wanted to wait. It happened on month 4, 2 pink lines on a Tuesday morning. He cried. Big shaking sobs in the bathroom while I stood there laughing through tears. He said, "I never thought I'd get to be a daddy." Looking back, I think that part might have been true. Not for the reasons I thought, though. The pregnancy was easy at first. He was attentive in a way that made my friends jealous. Foot rubs. Crackers by the bed for morning sickness. He started a spreadsheet of pediatricians. He toured 3. He toured 3 pediatricians, and I thought, Lord, what a man. Around month 4, things shifted. Subtle things. He started taking calls in the garage with the door closed. He'd come in and say it was a vendor, a contractor, a difficult client, and his face would do this little reset, like he was sliding back into a costume. He bought a new phone and said his old one was glitching, but I caught him a week later, using both. I asked once, and he told me the new one was for a side project. Real estate flips with a buddy. Nothing for me to worry about, sweetheart. You focus on growing our boy. He started bringing up money. He said we should refinance my condo and put the cash into a flip. He said we should sell my Honda. It wasn't safe for a baby. He'd buy me something better, just put it in joint name. He said he'd been talking to a colleague who worked in estate planning, and the colleague had said it was crazy that my mountain land and the trust were still in just my name. What if something happened to me during delivery? What would happen to him and the baby? He had a folder, an actual physical folder with tabs, and he put it in front of me at the kitchen table at 9 o'clock at night. When I was so tired, my back was on fire, and he'd say, "Just look at this baby. Just glance at it. Tell me you trust me." I didn't sign anything. Some old country wisdom in my bones wouldn't let me. He'd get quiet for a day or 2 when I pushed back, and then he'd come around with flowers and an apology, and I'd think, see, he hears me. He's a good man. He just gets carried away. My mother's voice would creep in. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. I would shove it down. At 6 months, I found a hotel charge on the credit card. A Hampton Inn in Greenville, South Carolina, a Tuesday in March. He told me he was at a property tour in Raleigh that day. When I asked, he didn't even blink. He said, "Oh, baby, that's a charge from when I had to drive a client. I forgot to expense it. Let me handle it." I let it go because the alternative was a fight, and I didn't have the strength for a fight. I was 7 months along. My ankles were the size of grapefruits. I just wanted to make it to the 3rd trimester without my marriage cracking open. That's when he brought up the refinance. He said the nursery wasn't going to be ready in time. Said he'd been running numbers, and the smartest move was to refinance the Charlotte condo, pull out some equity, finish the nursery, and have a cushion for after the baby came. He'd been so good about handling everything else, the pediatricians, the car seat installer, the childbirth class. I was tired. I was sore. The thought of one more decision made me want to lie down on the kitchen floor. He said his guy, a notary he'd worked with on prior deals, could meet us Saturday morning to sign. I said okay. I said okay because I wanted to lie down. Saturday morning. Strip Mall in a town I'd never been to, 40 minutes from our place. The notary's name was on the door, Magnolia Edwards, Notary and Document Services. Inside it smelled like lemon pledge and old coffee. The woman who came out from behind the desk had gray hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain, hands marked with the kind of liver spots my granddaddy used to have. She was warm with my husband, called him by his first name, said, "Lachlan, honey, how are we today?" He said we were great. We were getting that nursery wrapped up. She had us sit. She had me hand over my driver's license. She started flipping through the documents, and her pen stopped halfway through her signature on page 6. She looked up at me, looked back down, looked up again. I watched her eyes change. "Mrs. Beaufort," she said, and her voice had gone careful. "Could you come back to my office for a minute? Just to confirm something on your ID." He laughed and waved us off. I followed her down the hallway. She locked the door, and then she told me what I was about to sign. It wasn't a refinance. It was a home equity line of credit on the Charlotte condo. Fine, but stapled into the back of the same stack, blended in among pages of identical font, was a separate document, a quitclaim deed, transferring a 49% interest in the Callaway family land in Madison County, North Carolina, to my husband's name, accompanied by a power of attorney granting him authority to act on the trust on my behalf during what the document called periods of medical incapacity, including but not limited to childbirth and postpartum recovery. I read the same sentence 3 times. The room got very small. She said, "I've notarized for him before, twice. 2 other deeds of trust on properties I now believe were not his to sign. I didn't catch it in time those times. I'm catching it now." I asked her how she knew. She told me. Her son-in-law was a paralegal at a law firm in Asheville, and 3 weeks ago, he'd been doing a routine title search on a piece of property in Madison County for a client and had found a recorded interest filed by a man named Lachlan Beaufort. Her son-in-law had recognized the name from her notary log. He'd called her, asked if she'd notarized that document. She had. She thought she was helping a man buy a small parcel from his elderly aunt. The aunt had been an actor. The signature had been forged. The land had been quietly resold within 6 weeks. She said, "I've been losing sleep over it for a month. I told my husband if I ever saw that man again, I'd find a way to get the woman alone. I never expected the woman to be the wife. Honey, I am so sorry, but you cannot go home today. Not until you know what you're walking into." I sat down, finally sat down. I put my hand on my belly because I needed to feel the baby move. He moved. A slow roll under my ribs. I started breathing again. I asked her what to do. She said she had a niece who was an attorney in Asheville, family law and elder fraud, and she was going to call her right now. She said, "First, we need you to walk back out there and tell that man you're not feeling well. You need to go home and lie down. You'll come back next week. Smile. Be sweet. Don't let him see your face change." I went out. I smiled. I said, "Lachlan, sugar, the baby is doing somersaults and I am going to throw up on this nice lady's carpet if we don't get me home." He was up out of his chair instantly, all concern, a hand at my elbow. He apologized to the notary. She apologized back. I won an Oscar in that strip mall. I drove home in the passenger seat with my eyes closed and my hand on my belly and let him think I was sleeping while I memorized every word that woman had said. That night, in bed, I rolled over and pressed my face into his shoulder and told him I loved him. He said he loved me too. He fell asleep within 6 minutes. I lay there listening to him breathe, and I felt something I'd never felt before in my life. Not rage, not grief, just clarity. Cold and clean and absolute. He thought I was going to be a soft place to land. He'd married me for a soft place to land. He had no earthly idea what kind of women I came from. Monday morning, I called my office and told them I had a family emergency and would be working remotely for 2 weeks. They didn't ask questions. I drove 4 hours west to my mama's house. I hadn't been there in 11 months. She opened the door in her bathrobe with a coffee cup in her hand, and the second she saw my face, she set the cup down on the porch railing and opened her arms. I cried into her shoulder for the better part of an hour, the way you can only cry with your mother. She didn't ask one question. She didn't say one "I told you so." She just rocked me on her front porch like I was 6 again. When I could finally talk, I told her everything. The notary, the deed, the power of attorney, the hotel charge, the 2 phones. She listened all the way through. Then she said, "Get up, baby. We have work to do. My mama, the high school librarian. My mama who hadn't worked a day outside that school in 30 years. My mama who, it turned out, had grown up next door to the woman who was now the senior partner at one of the most aggressive family law firms in western North Carolina. They'd been pen pals since 1962. My mama picked up the phone and said, "Hey, sissy, I need you to clear an afternoon for my girl." Yes, that husband. I know. Yes, I know. Just get her in. She hung up. She looked at me and said, "We're going to Asheville Wednesday." The notary's niece, the family law attorney, met us in Asheville Wednesday afternoon. Her name was on the door. Her office had a window that looked out on the French Broad River. She was maybe 40, in a gray sweater and jeans. No nonsense, the kind of woman who didn't smile when she shook your hand because she was already 3 steps into the case in her head. Her aunt had sent over the documents from Saturday. She had already pulled my husband's public records. She slid a folder across the desk. "Your husband isn't your husband," she said. I asked what she meant. She said, "His real name is not Lachlan Beaufort. There is no Lachlan Beaufort with his social security number, his date of birth, his appearance. The man you married is named Travis Mosley. He is 44, not 38. He has been married twice before, both annulled within 18 months. Both wives had inherited property. In both cases, before the annulments, he attempted, through forged or coerced documents, to acquire interest in those properties. One of the wives sued him civilly and won. He paid her almost nothing because by then he'd moved the money. The other wife, in Tennessee, dropped the case. She told me when I called her yesterday that she'd been too scared to keep going. I had to put my head between my knees. There was more. He had 2 outstanding warrants in 2 states for related fraud. He had been operating under the Lachlan Beaufort identity for about 5 years, using a stolen ID from a man who died in a car accident in Louisiana in 2018. He built a whole life around it. He had a job, sort of, at a real estate office in Charlotte that turned out to be his cousin's, and the cousin was almost certainly going to be charged too. The original manager thing was theater. He had a lake house in South Carolina I'd never been to, registered to an LLC in Delaware, and the woman whose name was on the LLC was a woman in Charleston named Coraline, who had a 4-year-old son. Whose 4-year-old son? Whose 4-year-old son? We didn't have to wonder long. The hotel in Greenville. The other phone, the 2 prior wives, the dead Louisiana man. It all started locking together in my head like a horrible mosaic. The attorney, looking at me very calmly, said, "Here is what we are going to do. We are not going to confront him today. We are going to gather everything. We are going to coordinate with the FBI's Identity Theft Task Force, which is already aware of him under another file. We are going to wait for your delivery because if we move now, you are giving birth in the middle of a federal arrest, and that is not what we want for your baby. After your son is born, when you are recovered, we are going to set the table. He is going to walk into it himself, and then he is going to lose every single thing he has ever lied to take." I asked her if my baby was safe, if the man I'd married would hurt me or the baby. She said, "Travis Mosley, in 3 identities and 4 states, has never been physically violent with a partner. Not on record. He's a thief, not a brute. But you need to be careful, and you need to never be alone in a house with him without someone knowing where you are. We're putting eyes on you. Trust me." She had a private investigator in her office by the next morning, a woman in her 50s, retired sheriff's deputy from McDowell County, who reminded me so much of my mama, I almost cried. She wired up nothing on me, took no pictures, did nothing he could ever discover. She just watched. For 7 weeks she watched. She built the file. I went home Sunday night. I cooked him dinner. I asked him about the refinance and pretended to be embarrassed I'd gotten sick at the notary's office. I said, "Sweetheart, I know I was funny about it. Let's go back next Saturday. I want to do this right." His shoulders dropped about 2 inches, the relief on his face. I will never forget that relief. He thought I was back in the chute. I got bigger. He got more attentive. He bought me a maternity pillow shaped like a giraffe. He started rubbing my feet again. He picked out a little blue onesie that said Daddy's Boy and laid it over the back of the rocking chair in the nursery. Every night I lay in bed next to him and felt my baby kick and listened to him snore, and I planned. The PI sent updates to the attorney. The attorney sent updates to me through my mother's email account. The FBI quietly linked the file. The attorney in Tennessee, the one whose case had been dropped, agreed to come testify. The first wife in Virginia agreed too. Coraline in Charleston, when the PI got to her, broke down sobbing on her own front porch. He told her his name was Adrian and he was a divorced commercial pilot. She had pictures of him with their son at Disney World. I went into labor on a Thursday morning in the middle of August. He was in the room. He was a perfect performance of a husband. He held my hand. He fed me ice chips. He cried when our son was born. I named the baby after my granddaddy. He didn't know that the middle name I gave him was the maiden name of the attorney's senior partner, the woman my mama had grown up next door to. A small private joke between me, my mother, and the women who were going to walk me out of this. I came home with the baby. He cooked. He cleaned. He set up a coffee station in the bedroom for night feedings. I let him do all of it. I let him think the trap was working. He brought up the refinance again at week 4. He said, "Baby, now that we've got the little man home, we really need to get that paperwork done." I've got the loan officer breathing down my neck. I said, "You're right, sugar. Let's plan it for the christening." I told him I wanted to have a christening at my mama's farm, the Callaway place. 83 acres of mountain land in late September, the rhododendron just starting to turn. I said it would be small. Family, a few friends, the pastor my mama had known forever. We'd have it on the lawn. We'd serve sweet tea and pulled pork. We'd dedicate the baby to the land my granddaddy had loved. He thought it was the most beautiful idea he'd ever heard. He talked about it for 3 weeks. He invited his cousin, the one from the real estate office. He invited a few of his colleagues. His mother, he said, couldn't make it because of her health, which I now knew was a lie, because his mother had been dead since 2009. The day of the christening was clear and cool. The sky was the kind of blue that hurts. My mama had hung white paper lanterns in the apple trees. My granddaddy's old picnic tables were out, scrubbed and set with mason jars of black-eyed Susans. 46 people came. Most of them were mine. My college roommate, 2 cousins from up near Boone, the pastor, my old boss, a handful of Laughlins or Travises, people, including the cousin and a man he introduced as a colleague who was actually, according to the FBI, a man under investigation in his own right. What he didn't see, because we've been very, very careful, was the rest of the guest list. The notary, in a navy church dress, sitting near the back. Her niece, the attorney, in jeans and boots, leaning against the corner of the porch like she was just there for the food. 2 FBI agents in plain clothes who had introduced themselves to him as my mama's old neighbors. The PI with her camera. The first wife from Virginia sitting beside the second wife from Tennessee, both of them holding hands. Coraline from Charleston, who had asked to come because she said she needed to see his face when he saw hers. And, walking up the long gravel drive an hour into the party, holding a small overnight bag, a woman I had only met on a video call, the daughter of the man whose identity he had stolen. She had flown in from Baton Rouge that morning. She wanted her father's name back. The pastor blessed the baby. My son slept through the whole thing. Lachlan, Travis, whoever he was, gave a little speech about family and legacy and how blessed he was to be a father. He cried, real tears. I think by then he believed his own performance. People clapped politely. He reached for the microphone again, said he had one more announcement. He just wanted to say a few words about his beautiful wife and how grateful he was that she was bringing him so fully into the Callaway family, into this land, into this future. I took the microphone out of his hand. Gentle, smooth, like I practiced. I said, "Thank you, sweetheart. I have a few words too." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I told them, all 46 guests and the man holding the empty space where the microphone used to be, that 2 months ago a notary in a strip mall had locked a door and saved my life. I told them what I had been about to sign. I told them about the 49% quitclaim. I told them about the power of attorney that would have activated during my delivery. I told them about the man in Louisiana who had died in 2018 and whose name and social security number had built the life of the man standing in front of them. I said his real name. I said it slowly. I said Travis Daniel Mosley of Mobile, Alabama, age 44. I watched it leave his face. The Lachlan Beaufort mask, the slow southern smile, the steady hands. It just slid off. What was underneath was small and gray and tired and 44 and afraid. He had been somebody's child once, probably. I felt a flicker of something that wasn't pity but was adjacent to it, and then I remembered the deed in his folder, and the woman crying on her porch in Charleston, and I let it pass. I introduced his first wife. She stood up. I introduced his second. She stood up. I introduced his second. She stood up. I introduced Coraline. She stood up, and her son, who had been playing on the lawn with my cousin's kids, came and stood next to her looking confused. I introduced the daughter of the dead man from Louisiana. She didn't stand. She just turned in her chair and looked at him, and that was worse than standing. He started backing toward the gravel driveway. The 2 FBI agents who had been my mama's old neighbors stepped out from behind the porch posts. One of them was already on a radio. Travis turned and ran. He made it about 30 yards before the deputy, who'd been parked a quarter-mile down the road since 7 that morning, came up the drive. They put him on the ground in my mama's wildflower meadow, the one my granddaddy had planted in 1971. They cuffed him in the goldenrod. The cousin tried to slip away to his car. He didn't make it either. 46 people stood in absolute silence. Then somebody, I think my college roommate, said, "Well, dang," and the whole party started laughing and crying at the same time. My mama walked over and took the baby from me and held him up against her shoulder and patted his back and didn't say a single word. She just kissed the top of his little head. The second wife, the one from Tennessee, came up and hugged me so hard I felt her shake. Coraline did too. The first wife stayed in her chair, but she lifted her sweet tea at me, and that was enough. The pastor, bless him, said, "Folks, I think the Lord just answered some prayers. Nobody knew they were praying. There is still pulled pork. Please eat." The federal case took 11 months. He pled out the day before trial, after his lawyer saw the witness list. Identity theft, wire fraud, mortgage fraud, conspiracy. 8 years federal. The cousin got 3. The South Carolina LLC got unwound. The lake house got sold, and the proceeds split between Coraline, the first wife, the second wife, and the daughter of the man from Louisiana. I didn't take a dollar. The Callaway land never had to be defended in court because nothing he'd filed had made it past a recording office. The condo refinance never happened. The HELOC he'd snuck under the deed evaporated the moment we walked out of that strip mall. My marriage was annulled, not divorced, because the man I had married didn't legally exist. That detail meant my son's birth certificate had to be amended. My boy carries my last name now, Callaway, like 5 generations before him. My mama moved into the carriage house on the property 6 months after the christening. She gave up the rental in town she'd lived in since I went to college. She wakes up at 5:30 every morning and walks across the yard and lets herself in the back door of the farmhouse and makes the coffee before I'm up with the baby. We have breakfast together every day. Every day. We have 11 months to make up for. 12, technically. I'm counting. I asked her once, sitting on the porch swing with a sleeping baby on my chest, why she never said "I told you so." She rocked us with her foot for a long time. Then she said, "Baby, when your child is drowning, you don't lecture them about how they got in the water. You just go in after them." She looked out at the mountains. And anyway, I figured the man would teach you what I couldn't. And he did. I think about the Notary almost every day. I think about a 60-year-old woman in a strip mall who had been losing sleep over a thing she couldn't fix until the universe walked the man right back through her door, and how she had the courage to lock that door behind us. I sent her flowers every month for a year. She came to my son's first birthday. She held him on her lap and cried into his hair and said, "I'm just so glad I caught it." So am I. God in heaven, so am I. My granddaddy used to say that Callaways come from a long line of women who notice things. Women who pay attention. Women who, when something feels wrong, listen to that feeling instead of shouting it down. I shouted mine down for almost 3 years. I won't do it again. My son won't have to learn it the hard way because I'll teach him that the women in his family hear what isn't being said, and they trust it, and they act on it, and they protect what's theirs. He's almost 2 now. He runs in the meadow my granddaddy planted. He calls my mama Gigi. He has my daddy's eyes, somehow, even though my daddy has been gone 25 years, and I can't explain that, and I'm not going to try. The land is his someday. The trust is his someday. But more than that, the line of women who notice is his someday, and that, I think, is the inheritance that actually matters. A man tried to take it all from me. He almost did. The thing that saved me was a stranger with the courage to lock a door, and a mother with the grace to open her arms when I finally came home. I was lucky. I know I was lucky. I got out with my baby and my land and my mother and my name. Most women don't. So I tell this story every chance I get, in case it lands in the ear of one woman who needs to hear it. The thing your gut is telling you? Listen. The mother you stop calling? Call her. The paperwork he says is just boilerplate? Read it. Every page. To the end. And if a stranger ever asks you to step into a back office, alone, just for a minute while your husband waits in the lobby, go. I've thought about that morning in the strip mall 1,000 times since, about how close I came, about the version of my life where I just signed because I was tired, because I trusted him, because 47 pages felt like too many to read when my back hurt and my baby was kicking my ribs. That version of me lost everything. The land, the trust, my mama's peace of mind, probably my safety. The only thing standing between me and that version was a stranger who chose to be brave on my behalf. What I keep coming back to is the chain of small choices that saved me. The notary chose to look up from page 6 instead of just signing. My mama chose to open her arms instead of saying, "I told you so." The attorney chose to play the long game instead of confronting him at week 1. And eventually, finally, I chose to trust the cold, quiet voice in my chest instead of the warm, performing voice across the dinner table. Every single one of those choices was a small act of courage by someone who could have taken the easy road. The easy road, in every case, would have ended me. That's the thing about how a life unravels or holds together. It isn't usually one big moment. It's the accumulation of who paid attention and who didn't. Lachlan, or Travis, whoever he was, banked his whole career on people not paying attention. He counted on tired wives at kitchen tables at 9 at night. He counted on notaries glancing at signatures instead of reading paragraphs. He counted on me being too embarrassed to call my mother back. He almost won. He almost won because that's a reasonable bet to make against most of us. Most of us are tired. Most of us don't read page 42. I learned 3 things in those 7 months that I'll teach my son for as long as I'm breathing. The first is that your gut is not hysteria. It's not hormones. It's not paranoia. When somebody you love is working overtime to convince you that what you're seeing isn't what you're seeing, that itself is the thing you're seeing. Trust the cold feeling. It is older and smarter than the warm one. The second is that integrity is just doing the small right thing when nobody would catch you doing the wrong one. The notary could have signed and gone to lunch. Nobody would ever have known. She locked a door instead. That woman, in a strip mall in a town I'd never been to, is the reason my son will grow up on his great-great-grandfather's land. I owe her a debt I'll spend my life paying forward. The third is that the people who love you don't keep score. My mama had every right to make me earn my way back. 11 months of silence. A wedding she barely smiled through. A daughter who hung up on her. She didn't make me earn anything. She just got to work. That's what real love looks like, and it's the model I'm raising my boy by, because the world is full of people who will perform love at you and a much smaller number of people who actually do it. Learn to tell them apart early. Hold the second kind tight. And when your gut tells you something's wrong, for the love of everything, listen.